So, a Dish Network, the satellite TV provider, has a service called Sling. Sling offers something called Sling Passes, which let customers stream TV networks for a short period of time, like a day or a weekend or a week. These are pretty cheap offerings. The cheapest one, which is the Day Pass, goes for $4.99. The TV networks that Sling offers include networks owned by Warner Bros. Discovery. Warner Bros. Discovery doesn't like these short-term passes because Warner Bros. Pays for the right to distribute shows and events that last multiple days or weeks. And allowing a customer to watch those shows or events for just a day or a weekend doesn't work with that business model. For example, Warner Bros. Discovery pays the NCAA for the right to show March Madness basketball, which is an event that lasts multiple weeks. If people are allowed to watch just a day of March Madness on Sling, Warner Bros. Can't recoup the money that it paid to the NCAA for the right to show the entire multiple-week event. Now, to acquire the right to offer the Warner Bros. Discovery networks to its customers, Sling, of course, had to sign some license agreements. Warner Bros. Discovery sued Sling, claiming that the license agreements don't allow Sling to offer short-term passes, and Sling has to stop offering them. Instead, according to Warner Bros. Discovery, the license agreements only allow month-to-month subscriptions. But a court just disagreed with Warner Bros. Discovery and said that the license agreements that Sling signed with Warner Bros. Can at least be reasonably interpreted to allow Sling to offer these short-term passes. A similar ruling just happened in a litigation between Disney and Sling, so this is an issue involving multiple giant corporations and there's lots of money at stake. In this video, I'm going to talk about the dispute between Warner Bros. And Sling and what it can mean for creators in the independent film and TV space. But before we dive into this issue, I'm going to give the usual disclaimers. First, this isn't legal advice, because to give you legal advice, I would need to understand your specific situation and your specific needs, and right now I'm just a random lawyer talking to you on the internet. Second, this video deals with matters of United States law. So if you're making your film or TV production outside the United States, the legal concepts that I talk about in this video might not necessarily apply to you. And of course, if you find this video helpful, please like the video and subscribe to this channel so I can keep bringing this kind of educational content to young, hungry, enterprising filmmakers like yourself. So back to the dispute between Warner Bros. And Sling. The dispute in this case has to do with two separate license agreements. One license agreement between the parties says that Sling can distribute Warner Bros. Networks through a quote-unquote video programming subscription service offering that's sold to end users for a subscription fee. But it doesn't define what a subscriber or a subscription means. The other license agreement is similar. It talks about a paid subscription, but it doesn't define what that means. Like I said, when Sling started offering these short-term passes, Warner Bros. Discovery sued Sling, claiming that the license agreements don't allow that, because a short-term pass that only lets the customer stream a network for a day or a weekend is not a subscription, at least according to Warner Bros. A subscription, Warner Bros. Argued, is something that a customer pays for on a recurring basis, like a subscription to Netflix that you pay $9.95 a month for, or I think that's the lowest tier now, where they unfortunately serve you with a lot of ads. So what Warner Bros. Did was it asked the court to enter what's called a preliminary injunction, which is basically an order that requires the defendant to do something or refrain from doing something before a trial actually happens. To get a preliminary injunction, you have to show, among other things, that you're likely to succeed on your claims at trial. In other words, that you're likely to win. The court denied Warner Bros. Discovery's request for a preliminary injunction. The court said essentially that the language of the license agreement was ambiguous. That is, it was unclear about what a subscription meant. In other words, you could interpret the contract to say that a short-term pass is a subscription, or you could interpret it to mean that a subscription can only be an arrangement involving recurring payments. So the judge said, I can't, at least at this preliminary injunction stage, find that Warner Bros. Is likely to succeed in a trial, even though in a trial a jury could well find that Warner Bros. Has the better interpretation of the contracts. So what do I think about this ruling? Personally, I think it's a little bit of a stretch for the judge to suggest that a short-term pass that allows a customer to watch a show just for one day can be meaningfully called a subscription. I mean, in ordinary language, a subscription is just an agreement under which you agree to pay for a product or service on a recurring basis, and you have to cancel the subscription to end your obligation to pay. If I pay for a movie ticket, for example, that allows me to spend one night in a theater watching a film, nobody would call that a subscription. That's because I pay one time to see the movie, and I don't take on an obligation to keep on paying until I cancel. So it doesn't make sense to talk about canceling my subscription in this movie ticket context. Maybe if it turns out that I can't make it to the movie, I can get a refund of my purchase before the screening, but you wouldn't call that canceling a subscription, right? Normally, when you cancel a subscription to like a streaming service or a magazine, that's not the same thing as a refund. refund. You don't get the money back that you paid in previous months for your Netflix subscription when you cancel it, right? But still, because the license agreements didn't specifically define what a subscription was, the judge still ruled against Warner Brothers. What's the lesson from this case for independent filmmakers and TV creators? I think the most key lesson is that it's important that the contracts that you sign clearly define their terms. When I'm representing a filmmaker and they send me a draft distribution agreement that they got from a distributor that they're thinking about working with, I always insist on this. For example, I remember an agreement that somebody sent to me that referred to the rights with a capital R without defining what the rights were. Usually when a word is capitalized like that in a contract, it's being used in a way that's unique to the contract that you're looking at. It's a legal term of art, and that's why it needs to be defined. Now, if we're talking about a distribution agreement, you could say that it's self-explanatory that the rights with a capital R refer to the rights that are necessary to distribute the movie to the world. But that doesn't mean that the term rights is clear enough without a specific definition. For example, what if you, the filmmaker, want to keep the right to distribute books and podcasts that incorporate content from your film or they're based on your film? If you want to do that, the word rights with a capital R should be defined in the contract to specifically exclude rights relating to books and podcasts, right? If the agreement doesn't specifically carve out book and podcast rights, that's a potential problem. This is because typically distribution agreements give the distributor the exclusive right to distribute the film in certain media, for example, in theaters or video subscription services and what have you. So if you don't define rights with a capital R in the agreement to specifically exclude book and podcast-related distribution rights, you could end up accidentally giving your distributor the exclusive right to distribute books and podcasts with the subject matter of your film or incorporating content from your film, meaning that you can't do it yourself. So even if you think it's obvious what a word or phrase in the agreement means, if there's any doubt about it, I would usually ask for the language to be defined or clarified in the text of the agreement. In the unfortunate event that you have to litigate with the other party, like your distributor or whoever, about the meaning of the agreement, there's no guarantee, as we see from this dispute involving Warner Brothers and Sling, that a judge is going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Another point these streaming service disputes bring up is that because these short-term passes are becoming more popular among networks like Sling, you may start seeing provisions specifically dealing with short-term passes in distribution agreements that are offered to you. And this is particularly true if you have content that spans multiple episodes, like you're doing a web series or a TV series or something of that nature. And you may need to think about whether you want distributors to be able to offer your content on that basis, and if so, what terms and conditions you want to apply to that. So I hope this video was helpful to you in your indie filmmaking quest. Please comment below if you have any questions, and thank you for watching.